Turn with me today to Mark, the 2nd chapter, the first 12 verses there. I know I say this quite often, but today will truly be a different kind of message. A message that it's not new. I've preached it before when I was looking, studying, and it touched my heart, and I said, this is what we need today. There are forces today at work to try to drive Christians apart, try to drive the church apart. I understand we're in a pandemic, and I understand they say it's not safe for us to be together as a church body. But yet, others can. So I'm finding it hard today to not believe that there is forces, satanic forces even, that are trying to disrupt the unity of the Lord's churches and the people. There are things that will separate His true believers from the false ones. And those things are trials, persecutions. This morning is a story. This morning is a story about some people, some friends, who was helping a person who had physical difficulties out. There's a lot of theological stuff in here, and we'll touch on those things. But I want to emphasize this morning about the friendship and the closeness and the brotherhood or even fellowship that those people had. You know, Yogi Berra quoted one time, if you don't go to someone's funeral, then they won't go to yours. You have to think about that for a second. It's good for us to come together and as a church family and fellowship and worship. The church is more than that. It's more than just assembling in a building. It is a church family. And today will be an example of what it takes for us truly to be a church family if we're going to survive persecutions that we face. So what we're going to find here is a paralyzed man and some friends who brought him to Jesus. Let's look in Mark the 2nd chapter. Starting in the first verse, we're going to read the entire passage. If it stays up. No? I'll do it the old-fashioned way and I'll read it. Mark the 2nd chapter. And again, he entered into Capernaum after some days, and it was noised that he was in the house. And straightway many were gathered together, insomuch that there was no room to receive them, no, not so much as about the door. And he preached the word unto them. And they came unto him, bringing one sick of the palsy, which was born of 4. And when they could not come nigh unto him for the press, they uncovered the roof where he was, and when they had broken it up, they let down the bed wherein the sick of the palsy lay. And when Jesus saw their faith, he said unto the sick of the palsy, Son, thy sons be forgiven thee. But there were certain of the scribes sitting there and reasoning in their hearts, Why doth this man speak blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God only? And immediately when Jesus perceived in his spirit that they were so reasoned within themselves, he said unto them, Why reason ye these things in your heart? Whether it is easier to say to the sick of the palsy, Thy sins be forgiven, or to say, Arise, and take up thy bed and walk. But that ye may know that the Son of Man hath power on earth to forgive sins. he saith to the sick of the palsy, I say unto thee, arise, and take up thy bed, and go thy way into thy house. And immediately he arose and took up the bed and went forth before them all, insomuch that they were all amazed and glorified God. We never saw it on this fashion. This man, who is sick of the palsy, who could not walk, lived on a 3x6 mat most of his life. He was dependent upon others for everything. He never knew independence like we cherish, being able to do so. If you don't, we take it for granted. But he couldn't. There was nothing they could do medically. He couldn't contribute to society. He couldn't work. Everyone in this man's position in life had to be a beggar if he was going to live. Probably by the side of the road, and was dependent upon others dropping coins so that he would be able to live another day. This man had dreams. I imagine he dreamed that he had a healthy body, that he could walk and run, do some good work, maybe be married and have some kids. And then he looks up at the ceiling of a room he can never walk out of. And looks at the body that holds him prisoner. And looks at the mat that encompasses his world, and he knows that he'll never be free. No money, no job, no influence, no family, no future. And that's his tag. That's as is. And you know what that is. When you walk in the store and you see something that's damaged, and they'll say, as is. It's just the way it is. Take it or leave it. And that was his as-is tag. His as-is tag was 3x6, that mat that he was laying on. So what's he got going for him? Well, he had some amazing friends, is what he had going for him. And this story takes place not because of anything that the man who was palsy, it wasn't his fault. He didn't cause this story, but it was his friends that caused this story to be taking place. Without them, he would have never made it to Jesus. He never gets healed, and he never gets forgiven, and he did something right years earlier in his life. He had great friends. And it wasn't an accident that this man had friends. The deck was kind of stacked against him. His as-is tag was very visible. Everybody who walked by knew exactly what was wrong with him. You know, people who are physically challenged today say the biggest problem they have is with normal people and their attitudes. They can be unkind, look away, and not seeing them as a real person. In the ancient world, it could be a lot harder. The Greeks physically killed deformed babies. Jews thought that their handicap was because of their parents' sin. Yet this band of men refused to let any obstacle stop them. This little band of friends didn't happen by accident. In the face of obstacles, social pressures, inconvenience, financial pressures, time, energy, they chose to become friends. People rarely drift into deep friendships. You know, it doesn't just happen on its own. People must assign deep friendships as the top priority in their life. You have to work at being friends. And we spend most of our time making money, running errands, but we neglect the thing that God made for us, and that's community. You know, the first church met daily. They did everything on a daily basis. They were very close. We try to develop those same type of relationships today in our churches, in our families, and anywhere in our workplace. We try to develop those type of relationships in a fast-paced world. We try to have microwave friendships. But you can't do friendships in a hurry. You can't listen in a hurry. You can't mourn in a hurry. Many people lack great friends because they've never made it a priority. You see, you can't carry someone's mat in a hurry. And guess what? Everyone has a mat. So what does the paralyzed man go through in order for his friends to be with him? I suspect he probably got envious at various times that they had a whole body and he didn't. He must have wished secretly that he could trade places with them. And he must have struggled about how they view his neediness. Will they one day just get tired of him and turn him away because he's too much trouble? It's a very vulnerable thing to have someone carry your mat. They see your weakness. They might hurt you if they drop you. You know, there's a gift between friends, and that's trust and vulnerability and dependable faithfulness. This mat that he laid on, literally and figuratively, actually, instead of creating a gulf between them, it created an opportunity of servanthood and acceptance. It created an opportunity for them to draw closer. His weakness caused them to draw closer. This group is what I call them the fellowship of the mat. Whenever human beings love and accept and serve each other in the face of weakness and need, there is a need for a fellowship of the mat. And the truth is, everyone has a mat. Let the mat stand for the picture of human brokenness and imperfection. It is what is not normal about me. We try to hide the as-is tag. We try to impress others by hiding our weaknesses and our brokenness. I'm fine, we say. There's nothing wrong with me. And so we try to cover our mat, our brokenness. But it's only when we stop trying to hide our mat from others is when we can allow them to give and receive help from each other, and then the healing becomes possible. Brokenness aside, as a fellowship of the mat. So does healthy churches have a fellowship of the mat, where we actually say, I'm hurting, I'm broken, I can use some help. And true healthy churches and healthy people, spiritual people, will go and actually help. There are some people that actually want people to believe that they're perfect, that there's nothing wrong in their life, and they'll hide it. But we can't help them if they don't show us how to help. Everyone has a mat. We just can't hide it. Like, do you have a temper? Do you lash out at people you want to love? Do you say things in anger that you wish to take back? Do children look at you with frightened eyes or are scared of you? You hate it, but can you control it? What about fear? You don't want to be fear. You want to be fearless. You want to tell off bullies. You want to be the hero. You want to be not afraid of everything. But yet the reality is when you get sweaty palms, when you have to confront someone. What about the inability to trust? Need to be in control? You have the inability to speak to your heart? Maybe some great secret in your past that you feel guilty about. Crushing sense of failure, inadequacy, loneliness, just plainness. Sometimes we do mat management. Pretend that we don't even have that. We don't have any problems. Many make others think that we're healthy and strong and they can do anything they want. Maybe they can see other people's mats, but they can never reveal their own. My primary goal is to hide their brokenness from others. That's what their primary goal is. And they can be quite good at it. But you know what? If you hide your brokenness from someone, you can never have a great friends with that person. What would you think about that? So who carries the mat for you when you're broken? Who's carrying the mat for you? Who do you show your weakness and your struggles to? Who do you ask to pray for you? Who do you let see that your brokenness? And if you want deep friendship, you can't always be the strong one. You're going to have to let someone else carry your mat sometimes. The breakthroughs that I have seen over the years, brokenness aside, has come when people realize that they can't carry their mat. That they're going to need help. The breakthroughs I find that I have seen over the years is when they say, I can't do this by myself. I'm going to need help. Those are the real breakthroughs. When they realize how broken they really are. And this is what happens in this story. This group becomes friends against all odds. They become honest about their mats and their relationships and form the fellowship of the mat. Jesus comes to their town. They want to hear from this great rabbi. And one of them says, but we've got to get our friend to him. We've heard the stories. We've heard that he heals people. In particular, lame people. If anyone can do it, it must be him. We got to get him there. It would, if nothing else, it'd encourage you. Wouldn't it be something if he could really heal them? So to get him to Jesus makes it logistically harder for them to see Jesus. But they're thinking about it. And that's what friends do. Friends serve each other. They tell him he's going to go see Jesus and they'll pick him up at 9. And literally, they're going to pick him up at 9 on his mat. And they get to the home where Jesus is speaking and the place is packed. I mean, they're outside, they're hanging outside the door. Jesus is close, but they can't get through to him. They hadn't counted on this. And so they just watch for a while, and then one says, well, how can we get him to Jesus? Let's brainstorm. Let's just throw some ideas out, throw them, and see what sticks. You've been in meetings, you probably know there's no such thing as a dumb idea, right? Dude, I got it. What if we make a hole through the roof and lower him down? I imagine the other folks just stood there and looked at him and said, what? What? Okay, any other ideas? Well, there aren't any. It's the only thing they could come up with. But they're desperate to see Jesus. And they wouldn't let anything get in the way for their friend. So they get ropes to lower him and head upstairs. An outside stairway leading to the roof. Now remember, the roofs were flat. They didn't have the pitch roof, so they were safe. They got up on the roof, and they go about remodeling the roof. Now, it's not vandalism. They just took the dried leaves and the branches off. Now I want you to imagine this. Here they are. They're upstairs and they're about to tear part of the roof off. Jesus is in the house himself, and he's teaching. And all of a sudden they hear a noise from the ceiling. Leaves falling down. They're not sure what's going on. And then all of a sudden a whole lot more starts falling. Jesus stops talking. Everyone looks up and there's a hole in the ceiling. There's a hole in the ceiling with 4 pairs of hands making it bigger. I want you to imagine you're the guy who owned the house. You call him your State Farm agent, wouldn't you? But all of a sudden there's this hole, and there's 4 pairs of hands just tearing it apart. What's going on? By the way, they could probably call that an act of God. For the damned. These men are devoted to their friend. So they decided to do a little roof that would not get in their way. They became roof crashers for their friend. They'll remember that moment for a long time. Many of the barriers that keep us isolated from each other are surprisingly fragile. What are the things that are keeping us from having those types of friends? That type of community. I know this is exactly what Satan wants. There are people in churches today, probably not today, but they were before the pandemic, that were here but never really part of the church. Maybe because they didn't want to ever think that they had a man. Maybe it's because they never thought that everyone else was perfect, because whatever the case, this society today is trying to separate us, to keep us from having that great friendships, community. Too many churches are churches where people just come, they listen to a sermon, they sing some songs, and then they go home, and they don't even know the people that they're worshiping with. That's not what God wanted. God wanted us to be a community, a family. He wanted us to take the time to have those kind of relationships. Because, quite frankly, it is times like we're going through right now that is the only thing that's going to keep us for surviving. And so let's quit pretending we don't have mats, and let's put them all out there for everybody, and for those, and let people help us overcome these things. We got so many other things in this world today that keeps us from having these truly great friendships. Friends are people who've made a major roof-crashing commitment to other people. But we have confused friends with friendly people. Well, we're friends. Well, are we? All right, for those on Facebook, how many of the 500, 600, 1,200, 3,000 people on your Facebook are really friends? There's some people on there I don't even know. Okay? We don't take the time to be friends. We are friendly, but you know what a drug dealer does? People who are in the drug culture, you know what they do? They have lots of friends, but they're only friends as long as they can use you, and when they get something, when they get what they want out of you, then you're not a friend anymore. That's not a real friend. And it's one of the biggest problems we have is thinking that we have friends. Listen, a used car salesman will be your best friend for that couple hours that he's dealing with you. And then after that, he no longer even cares. They're not friends. How often do you do a little roof crashing? Not destruction of property. I don't want you on the roof going through the roof. But 2 tasks. Noticing and doing. When you see a friend discouraged, write or call. When you know someone needs to talk, listen even though you're busy. When you see a gift that would make someone's day, get it for them for no real reason. A random act of kindness. That's called roof crashing. That's doing something that's not expected of you. That's what friends do. But the irony of the mat is that when we are least proud of our mats and we want to hide them. We feel that if someone saw our mats, they wouldn't have anything to do with us. But in fact, the mat is really what brings deep and satisfying and committed friendship and brings us community as a church family. in Brokenness Society meetings, recovery meetings, and all walks of life. They're ashamed at some point that they all realized that each one there had their mats and they all were accepted anyway. They've had years of people turning their backs on them. But now you've got a group of people who have their own mats. How accepted with people who have real problems in this life when they know that they could come to our church and be accepted, mat and all. I've heard it many times from people from brokenness. They would want me back. I said, yes, we would. And we did. With open arms. Accepting the problems and the issues that they had in life. Because you know why? Because we got our issues too. We don't have to do it alone. We know everyone else does it. We understand our problems, our brokenness, our weaknesses. We acknowledge each other, and that's the community. That's the family that God wants for us. It's the first step to admit that you have a man. Community also requires trust. I want you to imagine the man on the roof. Okay, he's on a mat with ropes with 4 people on the lower him down. This is the biggest risk he's ever taken. Can you trust your friends? A drop from ground level is not that big of a deal, but a drop from the roof, that would be a problem. You wonder if you can trust the crowd. You go down, it'll be silly. Cutting in line is not the most, well, if you've experienced it, if someone cuts in line, you know how you feel. Can you trust Jesus when he's down there? How's Jesus going around? Maybe he can help. Maybe he decides not to help. Maybe he'll say, you got a good buddy, you got to get back in line because you can't do this. That would be fair, wouldn't it? Maybe he doesn't maybe he doesn't want to be interrupted. The preacher does not like to be interrupted when he's preaching. Okay? Well, yet if you don't go, if you don't take that chance, you'll never be healed. So he decides to roll the dice, and nothing will ever be the same. To take the chance. There are many of us who have got our own mats, our own brokenness, our own problems. We're just too scared to let anyone know. What will they think of me? Some may not like it. Some may want to turn away. But your real friends will be there today. If you're here today and you have these issues, don't cover it up. Don't deny someone to help. And for certain, don't deny going to Jesus for that help. There's only a certain amount that I or someone else can do to help you, but through God we can uplift you to Him, and we can show you how God can heal you. So how will Jesus respond? Well, He looks up and He sees 4 faces staring down at Him. Okay? He sees 4 faces. What does Scripture say? When Jesus saw their faith. And He saw their faith. Amazing. He was talking about the faith of the friends. Not the one who was paralyzed, but He saw the faith of the friends. Do you have any idea what the faith of one person can do for a friend? They dug a hole through a roof, they sent in their friend, and they never said anything. It wasn't what Jesus heard, but what Jesus saw. He saw their faith. 4 dirty, sweated, anxious, and hopeful faces, thinking only of their friend and hoping, above all hope, that Jesus could help them. It's then Jesus sees a little of what God intended when He created humans. He sees a little bit of this island of shalom, or peace, in the sea of brokenness. He sees people who love even in the face of a giant as-is tag. He probably thinks to himself, this is what it could be. This is what I want it to be. He sees their faith. And he looks down at the twisted, motionless body on the mat. He doesn't see a broken body, but he sees a broken, fallen soul. And he looks down. I want you to notice the order here. He looks down and he says, son, your sins are forgiven. Who said anything about sin? He just wanted to get healed. This isn't what he thought. But this is what happens when Jesus gets in the middle of true community. In friendship, sin has a habit of coming up a lot. You know, when I'm alone, I believe I'm a humble person. Yet when I'm with others, they receive all the praise. I get a little upset. When alone, I believe I'm a compassionate person. I cry at all the sad stories in the movies, yet when it makes with others, it makes me uncomfortable to hear about the other people's problems. And I don't have the time and I don't have the energy really to actually help with them. And when alone, I believe that I'm a loving person. But with others, sometimes they're quite unloving. Jesus is filling the desires of this man's friends, even deeper than they realize. You see, sin has been met, named, and dealt with. It goes way beyond the physical. But you know, this is probably the best gift that was ever given to man. Your sins have been forgiven. That coming to Jesus, that the desires of our heart and our body, we have to come to Him first and address the sin in our lives. It has to be. Son, your sins are forgiven. This man who had been mocked and judged his entire life is now clean, forgiven, and right with God. And it was said publicly by Jesus. He had the stamp of approval written on this man. And he's still laying there in that body that's crippled. But he was the most blessed. And he was the most important person. He was the most spiritually giant of that people in that room. You see, people in that room, they thought they were spiritual giants, Pharisees, Sadducees. And they were quizzing Jesus. And out from the very top of the ceiling, forward down came a example, a visual aid. Just happened to come to show them who He was. Because they got all upset. Oh, who can forgive sins but God? You're blasphemy. So, let me ask you a question. Is it easier to forgive sins or to make this man walk? What are they going to say to that? You see, these important people who he was actually talking to, they thought themselves as spiritual giants. They became really good at hiding their masks, trying to make people think that they were perfect in their own way. So no one knew how they were hurting, and that they themselves needed Jesus. So who do you think was greater in God's eyes? The spiritual leader who had no one to carry their mats to Jesus, or the four uncouth roof crashers who would do anything for their friend? Yeah. I think we know the answer to that. So what preoccupies you? When your mind drifts away, where does it go to? What are you thinking about when nothing's going on? Proverbs 23:7 says, as he thinketh in his heart, so he is. The businessman is always thinking new ways to make money. The coach is always drawing up new plays on his napkin. A young mother is always concerned, worried about is her baby okay? Do you know what God thinks about all that? What preoccupies him? And we can know because of Jesus. He is the Word and the mind of God made flesh. And Jesus said that the Father is constantly thinking of the ones He loves so much. He is preoccupied with redeeming and loving people. Shouldn't that be our response to what preoccupies us? So how do we become more spiritual? How is it that people can see us through our faith? How do we, and it's not by attending services. It's by whether or not you're reaching out to other people. Right now we're isolating ourselves. We're in isolation. Sure, there are churches that have great fellowship with each other, but not necessarily good friendships. Now, that's not the case at all, but as a general statement. What I'm trying to say is this. What I'm trying to say is this: the church is not reaching out to those who are obviously hurting, not loving, not trying to show the Redeemer to those folks. Can't really have the fellowship with God. And therefore, not with each other. We can't have with each other. The more spiritually mature you grow, the more you'll find your heart being drawn to people. You'll want to reach out to people regardless of their mat. Judge not lest you be judged, because we all have a mat, right? People who don't love people can't love God, just as the people who don't know multiplication tables can't do algebra. And even if you do know multiplication tables, some people can't do algebra. People who may know a lot about the Bible, they might be churchy. They might avoid scandalous sins, yet they don't love people. And this was the condition of the people, the hearts of the people in that room where he was lowered down. They had no one to bring them to Jesus. They had no love for the paralyzed man who needed Jesus' touch. And Jesus says something after he had done pronounced and said, "Son, thy sins have been forgiven." And then he had challenged them and asked the question, is it harder to forgive sin or to make this guy walk? He said, Jesus said, "Take up your mat and go home." Silence. Everybody's watching. So what does he do? The man stands up. Takes his mat off the ground. Folds it up. His whole life had been spent on that mat. Not just his body was healed, but his heart. Matter of fact, he's the healthiest guy in the room, spiritually and physically. So as the years go by, the fellowship of the mat, these people grow older. And as they die off one by one, they will all remember this special time of bonding and friendship, and they'll never forget what Jesus did for his friend. This little piece of shalom, this little piece of peace, this little piece of peace they experienced together. Don't you want that kind of peace? Don't you wish the world could experience that kind of peace? Don't you wish that people could just get along? We need to realize our brokenness. Realize the mats that we've been laying on. And we need to go to Jesus. If we can't go to Him, we need help. Have Him pick us up. Take us to Jesus. Regardless of the obstacles in the way. But whatever, we go to Jesus and let Him say to us, your sins have been forgiven. Rise up and walk. In that order. That's what this world needs, isn't it? Not just our churches. Our world needs to recognize that we're not perfect. That we can't carry ourselves. Who can have outside of our church families, outside of loving Christians, who does the world have to carry to bring to Jesus? As a matter of fact, they're to bring them to Muhammad. They're carrying them to Buddha. They're carrying them to humanism. They're carrying them to atheism, naturism, all the other isms. That's where they're taking and carrying their friends to for their healing. And we have the truth that only Jesus Christ can heal. Not just a body, but help heal your soul. You see, the fellowship of the Mass still exists. You find it here. You find, and they're in a friendship or a marriage or a church. It's not an easy fellowship to be a part of. The mats are awkward and difficult to carry sometimes. Some folks are stubborn and don't want you to carry them around. You really need to help them. But those who find this fellowship will never want to live without it again. It's the fellowship where Jesus shows up. He's in the middle of it. He's uplifting everyone in the fellowship. You know, where two or three are gathered together in my name, there I am midst of them. This morning, I know this was an unorthodox message, but hopefully it's a message that will penetrate people's hearts and minds. So realizing I'm not talking about just the joys of friendship, although that's actually there. We need to realize that we're broken. And the only person that can fix us is not your friends. The only person who can fix us is Jesus. Are your friends willing to pick up your mat and carry you? Are we willing to be those friends for someone else? You see, this morning, none of this is possible unless at some point in time you come to Jesus and He says, "Son, your friends, your sins have been forgiven." None of this is possible. You can't expect to have a relationship with Jesus unless He said it to you at some point. When you ask Him, when you're helpless and you realize that you can't do anything on your own, that you're broken, and you've tried all sorts of different things of the world, but that emptiness is still there, that brokenness is still there, and then you realize that you have an encounter with Jesus, He says, "Come to me, and I can make you whole." You ask Him to save your soul. He saves you. He says, "Your sins are forgiven." And He's made you whole in such a way that you, no matter what happens to your body, you're still whole. Have you had that experience? Is that an experience, an encounter with Jesus that you've had? If you haven't, may I suggest to you He's calling you today, that He's dealing with your heart, telling you that you need to have that experience with Him, that you need to ask Him into your heart, your life. Do you have someone that will help you? They'll pick up your mat and take you to Him? crash a roof just so that you'd be able to see Jesus? Do you? Or do you know someone that needs to see Jesus? Would you crash a roof for them to see? May we develop the friendships, the community that we have to survive the attacks, the problems, the trials of this life that's being born upon our churches. More importantly, that we'll continue to be there for people when they need help getting to Jesus. So as we stand and we prepare for the invitation, I don't know your heart, I don't know your life, I don't know what's going on. But I do know this is so critically important for our world today to come to know, to see, to hear, and for him to see our faith and say, Lord, your faith. He looks up and he says, your faith is what stands out to me. Oh, you can say that for us. So as we sing this morning,
Number 531.